welcome Sandie to
Thank
It's
you.
Time, which is a opportunity that I've created to talk to people that do really interesting things about their experience in lockdown and what they've learnt, the things that they might keep doing or not do, and how they might be on the way through, and particularly in relation to time and work-life balance and the way work.
Yep.
And for those people who are listening, I'm speaking to Sandie Dunsford, and Sandie and I go a wee way back, but not a long way back. And the reason I want to talk to you, Sandie, not because you're a friend, just because you're a friend, but you've had an interesting work life. You've run your own business, you've
Yep.
worked for other people in quite an exclusive business down in Queenstown. You and your partner have been on My Kitchen Rules,
We have.
fabulous cooks, and now you are the Associate Director at Victoria University, where you manage infrastructure and related services to students.
Correct. Yep. So student
So
accommodation.
highly relevant to the Wellington viewers and probably anyone else who's got an interest in students in workplaces around the country. And so thank you for talking with us. And
Yep. No problem.
I thought I'd start just by saying, how has your experience been personally as well as a manager? And has anything surprised you about this lockdown experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise, and I mean, I'm working from home and I'm quite well set up, so I made sure my setup was good. Because I knew that it would be busy. I think the biggest surprise has been not moving. I think that's been the hardest struggle for me. So at work, I'd do 6 hours of meetings a day easy, but walk between them. What I'm missing, I live in Greytown and do the commute every day over to work, and I'm actually missing that commute, bizarrely, because it is the cut-off from work to back home, and now I have the walk from the dining room to the lounge, and it's not long enough to actually switch off. So I found that previously, that drive home, I get to the bottom of the Rimatakas, and the drive over the hill actually physically switched me off, and home was home, work was work, and I was able to say, everybody knew if they needed to get hold of me, it was a phone call. Don't text, don't email me, I won't answer. But now I'm finding I'm just going to one room over.
Yeah.
I'm still checking emails at 7 o'clock at night because I haven't actually got out of that zone. So part of that is because at the moment we're incredibly busy, because obviously we're trying to bring students back into accommodation in quite a different environment to the one that they left. So that has been a huge amount of work. I've been lucky in that my family situation, one teenage boy at home and Ian, who's still been working through as well. So he's a firefighter. So I haven't had any interruptions. Some of my staff have had massive interruptions with family being at home. So their time's definitely been hindered. And then they sort of got into the zone, and then partners went back to work when it hit level 3. So then it became complex again for them. Yeah. So I've been lucky that I haven't had that. The physical moving's been hard. So now it's 6 hours of one after the other meetings, rather than actually physically being able to move. So I have noticed that. I do try, or I've just this week actually acknowledged that work was interfering with home a wee bit. So now I am trying to get off the computer by 4:30 and actually go for a walk and create that block now.
So new disciplines needed if you're going to be at home. Yep. And I totally get the point about being frantic, and it's difficult to be able to both be frantic and introduce new disciplines.
Yep.
What would you do differently then if you were going in again for the first time? And hopefully we'll never have, well, it won't be the first time because we've all done it now, but
I think I'd put that structure straight in and pretend I was driving home again. So I think I would put my timeframes back in and go, actually ring me if it's urgent outside that. Yeah. Whereas I've allowed that to blur. I've always started early. I've always been at work by 7 and started early. So I've noticed nobody else does, apart from a couple of key staff. So I think that hasn't helped the drag at the end of the day. So when I could go to work and be there by 7 and leave by 4, and then people knew they couldn't get hold of me, but now everybody else is working later because everybody's from home and they're all just getting up and starting at 9 rather than starting at 7 or whatever. So in the last week, I've actually started later because I was aware that I was starting at 7, finishing at 7, so I needed to condense that. So I would probably look at what my peers are doing by way of times that they're working and slot in with them, because that's made a difference just starting an hour later and sort of not beating myself up that I'm not, on the computer at 7 o'clock where I usually am. So I've probably moved my working hours, but I would definitely, do that walk away from the computer. And it's taken me 5 weeks or 4 weeks to work that out. So, yeah.
I don't think anyone listening should be beating themselves up for how long it's taken us to settle in and rearrange schedules and ways of working, because it's been so uncertain. And everyone's experience has been different.
Yeah, and my staff have hit the wall at different times as well. So they've some of them hit the wall quite early on and needed some extra encouragement and some extra, they just needed more contact early on. Some coped really well and then needed the contact a bit later on, and that depended on their circumstances. Like I've got one staff member who lives on her own, so she quite quickly absolutely missed that office space and that interaction, and she needed some extra, an extra catch up once a week. It was just also acknowledging what my staff needed by way of contact as well, and their circumstances, and they've all needed extra support at different stages depending on what's happening at home, really.
Yeah. Very similar themes. I've just read a fascinating article which I'll send you, and I'll put a link down the bottom for people who are interested. A global research firm has captured how this has been for people and working at home around the world, not just what they need now. Absolutely what you were saying, they need closer contact with their managers more regularly, more meaningfully, not just about work, but about, how are you? And also starting to capture some interesting trends, which we'll talk about in a tick, about what it might look like on the way out.
The other thing that I have instigated is wider team meetings, so bringing everybody into a meeting and giving them a general update, because that happens in the office normally, like it's a conversation over the coffee machine or over the water dispenser, whereas you don't have that ability to. And I've, by week probably 2, I went, oh gosh, they probably don't know about that. Or that's happening in that space, or that's happening in that space, and you have those things happen organically when you're all working in the one space. So I've also made sure I've done extra meetings with the wider team so that everybody's getting the same messaging at the same time as well. So it's actually increased meetings, bizarrely.
It's common, and I think you read about people getting kind of zoomed out. We do Teams at our work, but so if we talk about ways that we used to work, which is what you've just touched on, ways that we used to work and ways that we're working while we're in lockdown. So what have we brought in and what we've developed while we're in lockdown? What do you think are the things in your workplace that you'll let go of? And what things do you think you'll bring across that have just made, if we're talking in the context of creating an opportunity out of this to have a different way of working so people get to do their best work and also live their best lives?
I think we'll be a bit more open to people working from home a bit more regularly. So I think, it won't be such a big thing for people to go, actually, once a week I'm working from home. I think that will change. People, and especially when we get to level 2 and people are still aware of that physical distancing. I know a couple of teams in my offices that are, there's only 2 or 3 of them in the office, so we're actually coordinating to come back together. So they're all there on the same day and they're at home on the same day, so that because they're wanting the social interaction and they're lucky enough that they can distance themselves in the office. Whereas a group that a bigger group that I've heard about, they're doing the opposite. So they're actually coming back on opposite days or working out so that there's only like 4 of them in the office at any one stage, because everybody is acutely aware of distance and things will have changed socially quite a bit, I think. and everybody's going to be quite hesitant initially. Yeah.
Yeah, in many ways, I think it's a useful, this sliding scale. Back to what
Yep.
the sliding scale allows organisations to create their own new normal, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I've just reread Andrew Barnes' book about the 4-day week. I'm not proposing anyone does a 4-day week, but in there's an enormous amount of research. And his own research was that lead from the top, but let everybody create what works well themselves.
Yep.
And that's how it will end up working best.
Yep.
So will you leave anything behind? Have you found anything that really has no longer fit for purpose, apart from...
I think we've reprioritised, and probably the job has forced that a wee bit as well. So, the monthly reporting sort of stuff for financials gone on the back burner, but I think that's the nature of my role, because actually the pastoral care is the most important, and getting the students back in hall and that whole safety. Obviously it's absolutely strengthened any emergency response planning and things like that. Like, there's been lots of learnings out of it by that way, by process and things like that for us, huge learnings. No, I'll eventually end up picking things up, but I think I'm prioritising things differently now. So the priority levels changed, because in another month's time, the financial will be right back up at the top, because obviously the money's going to be really important. But at the moment, for me, it's not. It's actually that pastoral care and the safety and the health and safety of students and staff for coming back on site is actually all that we're looking at the moment, and the financial's gone on the back burner. But like I said, in a month's time it will flip, because it will be all about the dollars. Yeah.
And if you think about having a workforce that's partially at home and partially not at home, and I don't know, they might decide on the day, or I don't know how it's all going to work out, where do you see, how do you see that being managed from a manager's point of view?
I think there'll just have to be some pretty clear parameters. You can tell by workload whether your staff are taking abuse of the situation, if they're not producing something that they should have done within the set amount of time, and then it will be a conversation. Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing from people is that while before we did all of this, there was a worry that people would go home and not work properly. I'm not sure about your experience, but the one that we're having is the opposite. We've got to say to people, actually stop working.
Yeah.
There is an end point, as you said. There's an end point to the day.
Yep.
And
it's actually been shorter for a lot of people. So you've got to be realistic that mum and dad at home that are both working full time with a 1-year-old, they just cannot do a full day's work. Realistically, it's like, okay, can you work the morning and your wife, work it out, but a half day is actually acceptable. And that half day is a productive half day too, whereas it's not a duck out for coffee and a duck out and a talk to somebody. So that the time at work is actually working from home is, as we all know, more productive than being in the office. Yeah.
So we may have already touched on it, but maybe not. If we think about about making the most of this opportunity, because it has been seriously challenging both personally and economically, hasn't it, for the country?
Yep.
If you think about making the best use of that, what do you think the biggest opportunity is for workplaces?
That would be that time flexibility. Yeah. And a work-life balance, because a good work-life balance, everybody's happy and productivity's higher. So if everybody could get that balance right, and everybody's been in the both extremes now, like the whole time at work and then now the whole time at home. So I think there will be a lot of crossover, and I do believe it will be positive. Yeah.
So, and what do you think might be the obstacles that would get in the way of organisations allowing that to organically occur?
Management, probably. So it would completely depend on the personality above you. So, and the trust of the person above you. Yeah. So it'll be all about relationships.
So you will have all been at home. So
everyone
has experienced that. Do you still think that when we are collectively heading back into a way of working, that that what will return, if it hasn't already been in lockdown, and a sense of unease about having people flexibly working?
No, I think it will have eased people's thoughts about it. But I think for some organisations or even some parts of the university won't be as flexible as we are in an operational part. I mean, we're purely operational, very reactive, very responsive. None of that will change. But some other parts of the university may need to become more reactive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So organisations do, be useful for them to sit down now and have a think about the opportunities and the challenges and the policy review or systems review that might need to sit underneath this to enable people to benefits of, and the country to get benefits of working from home and workplace.
Yeah. And I'm sure in some spaces, some people will be asking, well, definitely staff's been looked at, staff levels are being looked at, because if you manage to do your work in a half day because you're balancing that child, do you need to be a 1 FTE? So there will be quite a bit of pressure to be looking at staffing levels, because that's our biggest asset, and our biggest cost.
It's interesting. Someone mentioned that to me the other day, and I thought that I hadn't considered it like that, because I'd always considered that if you have your outcomes set and they're a 5-day week outcome and you're able to do them in 4 days, that's the job, isn't it? So are we saying that there could be, one of the risks is that people...
Yeah, I think so. Because they've managed to accomplish their full day's work in half a day. So if you're at home, can you have more? Can I give you more work to do because I've allowed you to have a day at home? So therefore your output actually needs to increase because I've acknowledged you're more productive at home. So here, can you do this project as well?
Yeah, so that needs, people need to be mindful of that, don't they?
Yeah.
How have you experienced workloads generally in lockdown during this time?
It's different across my team. So some of them were very front facing, very customer facing. So obviously they've lost all that, person arriving to ask a question stuff, and it's definitely they've got emails. So they're doing different types of work. So we've put them onto different project work and things. Most of us are busier, but I think that's just situational, and that's just the nature of our role. I think overall, in the student and campus living group, like the wider directorate, people were probably doing equal or as much work as they would have been doing, but that's because everybody's operational, and even the ones in the childcare are working out how many social distancing equipment they need to move out so that the kids aren't standing together, and how that and the rec centre, obviously they're moving stuff around and getting new cleaning procedures, and everybody's probably got a heightened workload at the moment because it's all going to be new policy, all new procedure in level 2.
Yes.
And I think BAU will change. For us, definitely BAU will change. It will look different when we get back down to level 1 or no levels. Things will have changed because we've had some good stuff come out of it, by way of staffing and 24/7 cover and additional stuff that we've put in place that we'll actually take forward as the new BAU. So BAU will be changed slightly.
Yes, I mean, my background's health, and I keep thinking it's not a bad thing for organisations to rethink infection control processes. This won't be the last COVID.
No.
It's coming again, and so hopefully, to your point, organisations have reset their emergency and health and safety programs so that if another one comes through, hopefully it won't be quite as bad because we've all been washing our hands and that sticks.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think the social distancing is going to be interesting in workplaces. There's lots of talk going on now that we're not going to be cramming people into workspaces, cheek by jowl. And but now there's going to be distancing, and hot desking may not be what we're going to be doing because it's just an easier way to spread infections and viruses.
Definitely. Yeah.
So in this context that we've been talking about, what question could I be asking that I haven't asked that might be useful to start to answer?
I might have to think about that and email you if I think of anything. Can't think of anything on the spot. It is all about re-establishing a new norm, though, and then taking some of what you've been doing in this last 6 weeks and letting it influence what the new BAU is going to be. Because there have been, some really good, outcomes. Zoom, you can Zoom a meeting. Who would have thought you could actually Zoom into a meeting? You actually physically don't need to be there. I mean, that was absolutely abnormal to do that 6 months ago, but absolutely that's all everybody's doing now. So, there'll be things that do change and just become normal.
And I think this is why I like the slide out of this. It's going to take a little while, because if organisations get an opportunity to cost the savings from not flying around the country to meetings or not moving around to campus for meetings, and being able to, if face-to-face meeting becomes an exception, not the rule, then and a third, some people are saying 20% to 30% of your people will decide to stay at home. So, the infrastructure footprint for offices
will change.
I
was at I was at the supermarket the other day, and there was a lady talking, and her husband works on, they've got 2 floors of a building and they've gone down to 1, and it's week on, week off, and deep clean between. So they will be hot desking. They'll be sharing a desk with one other person, and they'll be in 1 week, and the other person will be in the other week, and they've automatically just lost, a whole floor's lease costs. I was chatting with my son, Tom. So he's just changed jobs, and he started kind of at the bottom of the rung, if you can call it that these days, and working in a new flat, and like others, has been astounded at how much money he's been able to save by not commuting. And I tend to think, not just my son, people that I speak to, I'm doing a similar exercise at work, talking to people about what their experience is like, and it's amazing how many people have said that the lack of commute has profoundly impacted on their well-being and their budget. Yeah, huge.
Like balance.
Yeah, we haven't managed to suffer that because, or recoup that, because Ian's travelling over the hill still to work. But definitely, cooking rather than Uber Eats, I'm sure will be affecting a whole lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting. So anything else we should be canvassing before I let you go and take care of those students who are about to return to campus?
Yeah, we're just trying to predict percentages back, which is what we're trying to do. So as you do. Not that I can think of, Julie. I think of anything, I'll just flick you an email.
That'd be fantastic. Hey, and thanks very much. And thanks very much for taking care of our students in Wellington. They're in good hands.
You. We love them. We love them, and we want them back. Yeah. The place isn't right without them. Too quiet.
Yeah. One question before you go, I just want to ask you, pick up on this concept of virtual versus face-to-face. And where do you think that's going to balance out? We've talked a bit about meetings, but and you talked a little bit about groups of people that really are missing the face-to-face interaction. And
I think we are, humans are social. They like to sit in the same space as somebody else. So socially, it'll be slow to get back to it. But I think in 6 months' time, we'll all be going out for dinner like we were, and we'll all be doing those things once we get down through the levels and no levels. But I do think everybody needs to see somebody, touch somebody, hug somebody, which isn't going to happen for a while, but it will happen again, I hope, because I think that's what we need.
Yes, elbow touching isn't quite the same, is it?
No, it's not. There's something about, well, maybe that's just because I'm a hugger. I was a hugger. I always hug a friend. But not any longer. So new social norm.
I look forward to having one of those hugs very shortly.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much.
No trouble.
Thanks a lot.
No trouble. Thanks, Julie.
Bye.
Bye.